Lunar Knights here. Welcome to part 2 of the Advanced Wars No Capture Challenge, where, as the name suggests, we are attempting to beat the game without capturing properties. If you haven't seen part 1, I'd recommend doing so first by clicking the link in the top or down in the description so that you won't miss a minute of the action. As a quick refresher for everyone else, the rules for this run are quite simple, but I am changing them ever so slightly since part 1. Now, I am not allowed to capture any properties whatsoever. This includes labs. HQ caps are of course still legal, and I may build any unit I can afford, though the nature of this run greatly limits my funds. This change comes because at the time, I thought it was impossible to pass the tutorial lab mission without a capture, but I've since heard of a way around and will be investigating that in this video to see if we can make this a pure no capture run after all. Before we get rolling, if you enjoy this type of content, be sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any ideas for future challenge runs, let me hear them in the comments below. Without further ado, let's begin by taking a trip back in time to Orange Star's lab mission. The last time I was here, I tried to rout the enemy for an auto win, but when I did, the mission still did not end and I was forced to capture the lab to progress. As it turns out, there's one more unit I missed. Hidden in this reef here is a black hole lander. Let's see what happens if we try the mission again and this time take out that lander. As payback for having had to use a capture last time, I'll even make sure the honor of the last hit falls to an infantry unit. As it turns out, we win. Despite what I thought before, it is possible to rout here, and we're now back on the road to a pure no capture challenge. I was curious if winning this way would make Neo-tanks unavailable, since you wouldn't have technically found the plans, but it turns out you still get them. Neat. With that remedied, time to return to the present. When last we left, we'd managed to liberate Blue Moon after a difficult factory battle that nearly ended the run. Now, we march into Yellow Comet to continue our campaign, gaining access to 3 new COs. Though these missions unlock at the same time that Blue Moons become available, the game rates these as harder, so we've saved them for last since I'm not sure how well they're going to go. Yellow Comet has classically reflected a difficulty spike for certain missions thanks to new mechanics like black hole lasers and smaller cannons, and with our limited resources, both of those are a potentially devastating counter to my armies. We start off with Convey's first mission against Flak, and I'm given 4 properties to work with. The rule of thumb for this mission is always to rush for the middle span to seize control of the missile field and bases there. We can't capture the bases, but we do still have the missiles and definitely don't want them used against us, because now, more than ever, they will make for a dooming blow. Convey's units have boosted stats to make them some of the strongest units in the game, but that comes at a price. Literally, in this case. His units cost 20% more to deploy, which is a serious problem for our limited funds. At times where I might have otherwise been able to send out a tank, the best I can do is a recon instead. The distance we need to cross is notable too, so marching infantry on their own will take many days. Everything also costs more to repair since that is based on a percentage of the base cost. Though repair won't come into play in this mission because of how far away we are from the properties. We managed to reach the central span first, but a tank is on its way. At this point, I don't like my odds of holding the area, so it'll be a goal to fire as many missiles as possible to deny them from my enemy until I'm sure I can hold. On my first shot, I get lucky and hit 3 of his units. I'm going to prioritize scary units like that coming tank, but also units on properties like his lander, because damaging those will force a repair and be a serious drain on his funds, going a long way toward leveling the playing field. A tank of my own is on its way, but needs several days to get here. Once I'm confident I can secure the center, I begin to prioritize artillery. Ranged units are always valuable on the tight choke points of a bridge, and we learned last time that they're the most cost-effective unit I have at my disposal. From here, the match gradually turns to my favor as we repeat similar tactics to what worked well before. We're slower than usual to get moving, but once we do, our boosted units make relatively quick work of Flak. If you're curious what I mean by relatively quick, I don't know how many days this mission took, but from a time standpoint, my winning run ended at just over 30 minutes, which is quick for these challenge runs. It did get a bit tense as he starts deploying medium tanks, but we pull through. What was not quick, however, is our next mission. Thinking that it would make for another easy win, I head to Sensei's mission next. Sensei is an extremely powerful CO that favors infantry and B-copters, both of which are cheaper units, so I thought I'd be able to use that power to roll through Adder with little trouble. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I play this mission, I usually like to hold off my enemy on the left coast while I push into the center peninsula to capture the airport and base. With the added deployment power they give, I overwhelm my opponent. This challenge doesn't favor that plan, but I'm not worried yet. At first, I aim to try something similar, but slower, using T-copters to bring powerful mechs up to help with my normal push. That falls apart because of hidden missiles, making me realize I don't have the resources to support a two-pronged push like that. And my new plan is to directly push up along the left with ground units while using B-copters for heavy support and to keep Adder off the key properties on the peninsula. If he starts deploying air units of his own, I'm in big trouble. Attempts here usually follow a common pattern. I'm unable to push up the western landmass through normal means, and the forests there make it too difficult to bring in rockets quick enough to be useful. At best, I'm only able to stalemate Adder, during which time he's able to eventually secure key properties on the peninsula to rain air units down on me. As I'm forced to divide myself, I lose momentum and he's able to break my line, eventually securing his win. I still get the feeling this mission should be possible, but for the time being, I can't find a way to do so. I can likely stall for a very long time, but without some bold tactics, I'm always stuck on the defensive, which is a recipe for a slow death when my opponent can outproduce me this much. Something worth noting is that for this mission, the best part of Sensei's power is rendered useless because I don't have any cities for him to drop infantry onto, so the most it grants me is an offensive boost from my B-copters. Not terribly useful when they already do big damage and still get one-shotted by anything anti-air, which Adder likes to build a lot of on this mission. I used to think I could at least deploy something on my HQ, but that turns out to not be the case and I'm met with defeat after defeat. For the time being, I'm stuck here with a loss, so I decided to take a break to visit Sonia's mission next. I'm probably saying her name wrong, and it doesn't help that I kept typing Sasha in my script, but oh well. I consider her the weakest of the 3 Yellow Comet COs, so I had a feeling this one was going to be a long haul. There are 2 bases I usually capture that are out of reach now, and I'm not confident I'll be able to hold them from Adder because of its initial onslaught, which includes several troublesome air units. Sonia must be well liked by the people of Yellow Comet, however, because upon loading in, I found that I had 9 properties committed to my aid. 9 properties! That's 9k funds a day, which doesn't really sound like much when you think about it, but compared to every other mission so far, this was amazing. I think this is the most properties I've had this entire run, and it made me feel rich like Colin. If I can survive the start, I'm confident I can turn this fight around. Despite what I just said, that start does go pretty rocky. I try to rush towards the bases to begin with to delay any infantry caps, but spreading out like this is devastating, and I end up getting pushed all the way back to my little corner and losing expensive units. I'm even forced to hide an anti-air in a forest and just hope it doesn't get found, as other units are picked off one by one. It even becomes mech span time just to bolster my numbers and damage enemy vehicles. I do manage to survive and push back, and once I've made sure that the 2 bases won't be captured, it's just a matter of whittling down Adder's remaining forces and working through the 8 turrets I need to destroy to win the mission. He has a few surprises waiting for me in the form of hidden rockets and medium tanks, but with this much money to work with, they only delay the inevitable. Not feeling ready to attempt Sensei's mission again just yet, I head to Convey's pre-deployed mission to get footage of how it's not possible to beat because you have to capture properties to... Wait, I don't have to capture these properties to win? I just need to deny and rout? Well, in that case... We march our extra powerful army onward to certain victory, actually playing a mission more or less like normal for once. Amusingly though, despite how this should have been pretty straightforward, I actually lost my first run on it because I skipped all of the intro dialogue so fast that I forgot that these were prototype lasers that can only attack every other turn. I thought they were the same as the ones in Green Earth that can attack every turn, so I wasted a bunch of time slowly maneuvering with them before I realized my mistake. Whoops. Anyways, it's back to Sensei after this, but not in the way you think. We go to his second mission instead of the first to give that a try. My objective here is to destroy 3 small cannons, and I'm given a nice air force to help with that goal. The catch is that my air force is separated from my HQ and the cannons by multiple pipe seams. Meanwhile, Adder has a massive army of his own rushing for my HQ. I need to hold that line to prevent him from securing an HQ cap before my reinforcements can arrive. This mission was a ton of fun for me to play because it's been so long since I've had this many powerful units under my command and get to actually use them for once. Because of that, I really don't have a lot to say on this mission, beyond that it was just really cathartic to smash through the pipes and then lay waste to everything in my path. I guess if there's one point I'd make, it's that I had to be pretty careful of fuel, because it did get low for my air units, and if I lost them, it was game over, because I had no way to build more. But fortunately, I was able to prevent that from happening. Oh, that felt good. Enjoy a bit of extra footage here, because this is almost certainly the only time this run I'll ever feel this powerful. Alright, power trip over. Completing this unlocks the factory mission. Before tackling it, I decide to try and take another shot at the other Sensei mission. It's a similar mess to what it was when I first visited it, and at this point, I don't rule out that it's possible with good RNG and a long grind, but I don't currently like my odds of beating it with my sanity intact. I decide to move on to the Yellow Comet factory mission instead, which is looking to be equally troublesome right now. This might sound strange given what I've said earlier, but give me time and I'll explain my thought process. I opt for Convey to lead Yellow Comet and Grit for Blue Moon. This factory mission is one that haunts me for reasons you'll see in an upcoming video, and so I knew from experience that it was going to be tough, and that it was going to depend entirely on Yellow Comet. My ally starts on an island where they're meant to capture a port so that they can leave that island. Problem is, I can't capture that port, and therefore they are going to be stuck on that island the entire match. On turn 1, Adder always builds a battleship from his factory, and as the match progresses, he will eventually invade the Blue Moon Island from the north. If Blue Moon is destroyed, I lose. So I need a commander that can defend that island from any threat, and since Grit's extra range means his rockets are the equivalent of a battleship, he was the best choice. South to Yellow Comet, I start with 7 properties, which isn't great considering the onslaught coming my way. Thankfully, one of these is a port, and so I decide my best course of action relies with speed and aggression. My hope is to build battleships to push north and destroy the pipe with their long range, because I don't like my chances of trying to push past through the factory path, and I know the longer the match goes, the harder it's going to get. It takes Convey an extra day over the other COs to build his battleship, but it has boosted offense and defense. I'm expecting to be harassed on my way to the pipe and take damage, so I'm hoping that with these bonuses, I'll be able to get there with enough power left to destroy it. Most of my turns this match are spent being skipped to save up money, though I do build some infantry to at least have some presence. In Grit's case, I'd hoped building one would draw Adder's battleship north, but I didn't usually get so lucky, and he insisted on coming south to harass Yellow Comet. The long and short of how these first strategy attempts go is that I definitely overestimated the value of Convey's extra defense versus getting out an earlier but weaker battleship. His units of course win most matchups, but with so few funds to work with, my battleship rushes always fail so far. Their biggest threat is submarines, which tear through my defenses. Adder's battleship is also a major pain, because it likes to zone me out of areas I want to go, and while it never sinks anything, it's definitely able to delay me a few turns to buy time for a sub to get into danger range. I even tried pulling back into Grit's territory to bait and destroy subs, but this was the one time that the AI was actually smart enough to stay underwater, meaning that Grit was unable to fire upon them. That was something I'd completely forgotten about, and even ended up sacrificing a run for my lapse of memory. I try a few different approaches here, including attempting to build up a Navy convoy like real-life militaries do, but my funds are too limited to manage a tactic like that. There's a few big lessons to take from this failed strategy. The most important is that the race to destroy the pipe is tighter than ever before, since I only have one ally to depend on, and water units are too expensive for me to rely on in any serious combat capabilities. In most cases, if it even reaches the point that I need to attack Adder on the water, I'm already too late and the run is lost. I have enough to get at most 2 battleships out, and that's all I can hope to work with in a best case scenario. Usually though, that second one will get trapped in or around port, making it a distraction but not a particularly valuable one. Another lesson, or perhaps more of a gripe really, is that Adder's turns take so long. He deploys a ton of units and of course has to move most of them, and then on top of that, his low power charge means he's using his CO power like every other turn it feels, further slowing down the match. This doesn't really affect the gameplay itself, but it does wear on you, as when you're quickly ending turns to build funds, you spend so much more time just watching him move around than you actually do playing. Let's call it
emotional damage.
And take note that the footage you're seeing of his turns is already sped up. This isn't going to work with Convey, and so it's time to switch gears. Sensei has weakened stats, so I have no choice but to opt for Sonia, who I always try to avoid unless it's a Fog of War map. Her units are labeled as normal power, but it's not actually entirely accurate like that, because in this game, she receives what is called a bad luck modifier that causes her to frequently hit for less damage than she should. So it's best to treat her like she has a standard firepower debuff. That way, when you hit for less power, you're not surprised. That doesn't really matter here, since my main target is the pipe and a cannon or two, and as far as I'm aware, the luck modifier doesn't apply to static objects like them. Sonia's normal unit cost turns out to be a huge game changer, and the winning run comes not long after. It's even surprisingly simple once I restart enough to get some lucky battleship RNG. As with every promising start, I skip my first few turns so that I can build a battleship sooner. Adder will always build that turn 1 battleship, but whether he goes north or south seems to be a coin toss. I need him to go north, and again try to encourage this with grit infantry. Otherwise, I'm going to get zoned out and it's a reset. He starts this way, and now I need to hope he stays the course to give my first battleship freedom over the high seas. For now. I'm not sure if that infantry actually increases the odds Adder will go toward grit, but my thought process is that the AI knows it needs to defeat units to win, so if there's only one unit on the map, it should be more likely to go toward that unit. Right? Whether this logic actually has any real grounds, I'm not sure. I won't pretend to understand the AI in the game. Regardless, now that I have a battleship, I move it north to a nearby reef that keeps me out of cannon range, but puts the cannons in my range. My target is the cannon on the far side that covers the water near the pipe. Once I take that out, I will sneak around it to position my ship. Time is tight though. Adder already has B-copters on the map and can spawn a sub at any time. Unlike with Convey, I don't have the boosted defense to even comfortably shrug off shots from the B-copter, much less a sub. I have to act before they reach me, and I also need to hope that Adder doesn't turn his battleship around to zone me out. A battleship does 55 damage to a cannon, meaning that it takes me 2 turns to destroy it. The same is true for the pipe. Battleships can't move and attack on the same turn in this game, however, so every turn I spend getting into position is one step closer to a loss on my end. Adder's battleship also came into range of grit during this, which takes at least one pressure off me, even if it's short-lived because he immediately deploys 2 more B-copters while a third engages me. It definitely hits harder than it did with Convey, and I start to worry again. You can really see my tension as I position the battleship next turn, and I'm so paranoid about placement that I am constantly double-checking ranges. It doesn't help when Adder deploys a sub that beelines for me. I take my first hit next turn, and it becomes the moment of truth. I need one more hit to win. If his sub attacks my healthy battleship, it's game over. In desperation, I move my damaged battleship into his attack range to try and draw his fire there instead. My fate is now in his hands. He hits my damaged ship, a B-copter hits my healthy one, and then the sub moves. Right down to the damaged ship. Its sacrifice guarantees my survival, and on the next turn, I destroy the pipe at long last. Yeah, that was close, but we did it. It took me less time to find the winning strategy here compared to Blue Moon because I had the right idea right from the start this time. I just wasn't sure how to approach it. All in all, with the exception of this mission and the first Sensei mission, I'd say Yellow Comet was the easier of the two, which I didn't expect. I'm always fighting an uphill battle with this challenge, but in this case, I didn't constantly have that feeling that one bad play would doom the run like I did there. Not saying that feeling wasn't around, but it didn't have as much of a daunting presence by comparison. I think a big part of that comes from generally having stronger COs and different objectives beyond just routing the opponent to break up the grind. That first Sensei mission, though, I wouldn't wish that one on anyone in this challenge. Now that I'm past Yellow Comet, I can say that I had word after I'd recorded this section that it is possible to beat that Sensei mission, with a viewer reporting that they were able to do it after a 327 turn grind and some good luck. But even still, it was a close fight. Kudos to you for powering through that slog. For the rest of you, don't worry about me dodging that bullet. I'm not getting off easy because I'm certain the next continent is about to pay me back in full for that. Speaking of which, it's time to push onward to Green Earth. Half their country is already overrun by Black Hole, and it's our job to help them win it back. We're even going to do it without inconveniencing the people of this fine nation as well. Hopefully. This opening sequence always hyped me up though, so I'm feeling unstoppable right now. Let's see how quick Hawk can knock that wind out of me. I'm faced with 3 missions to start, and I choose Jess's battleship mission to begin with. This mission offers several valuable bases and a port to capture, and also has a hidden lab map on it. You need to destroy 9 battleships that are in port making repairs, and these battleships can only be damaged by ranged units and tanks, though you're pretty much dependent on ranged units because tanks really only scratch the paint. Without access to those properties, that means this is a no-build mission when it's not supposed to be, and nearly a no-death mission because if I lose any of my 3 ranged units, I absolutely won't have the firepower to take out those battleships. I'm also doomed if I lose my anti-air because Lash deploys plenty of air units, bombers in particular. I always start this with a slow advancing defensive block until I've dealt with Lash's tanks. I want to pull as many of them in as I can into a ranged unit barrage to deal with them as safely as possible, and once that's done, I rush forward to expand. I'm on a time limit, so while turtling works well at the start, I can't afford to do it more than a couple turns. There's a base Lash will capture that I need to prevent, and with so little firepower at my disposal, I need to start chipping away at the battleships as soon as is safely possible. There's a lab mission here, but I'll have to ignore it since I have no way to get to it. Plus, I can't capture it even if I did. Little does Lash know, I'm actually a bit of a specialist on this particular mission, and I'm oddly familiar with its workings compared to most other missions. For example, did you know it's possible to prevent Lash from ever capturing the base on the far right? It takes some great RNG and good rushing, and I didn't manage it with any of my attempts on this particular run, but it can be done. That artillery in the south doesn't like to leave that little landmass for some reason either, and even though I pretty much always destroy it just as a precaution, you can ignore it and it doesn't really do anything. I found the fastest way to progress is to split my forces, keeping my rockets and some support to the left while everything else goes right to loop around. After not capturing the base to the right, I park a unit on it to prevent deployment, and there's now 2 big points of note. The first is that Lash will be sending bombers and B-copters my way now, and with only 2 anti-air, I must be very careful with my engagements to take them out quickly and efficiently. If they get too damaged, I'm no longer able to repair since the trip back to the start would waste too much time. In an ideal situation, I can badly damage a bomber so that it will fly home and repair, and thus block the airport for several turns, but this is a risky gamble, and I have lost runs to being harassed by a 2 HP bomber that refuses to fly home for some reason. The second is that I don't have enough firepower to destroy all of the battleships, so I need to split my fire in such a way to encourage Lash to join her units as often as possible. This is easier said than done as well, because while she does regularly join them, gauging when, how, and where she will join them can cause problems. The worst case is when she joins 2 out of range of a unit, forcing me to waste a turn on movement. If all goes just about perfectly, I should be able to defeat them on the final day though. The timing itself is incredibly tight, and I have to pull my medium tanks to assist. As mentioned, even Jess's boosted tanks only scratch the paint. A regular tank is rated as doing 0% damage, and even a medium tank is normally only single digits. Still, those medium tanks can do 1 HP chip damage on a high roll hit, and it makes a difference. I destroy the ships with my very last artillery shot and no time to spare. This is a satisfying mission to beat, even though it can get frustrating with how tight the time limit is. Lost runs often occur with just 1 or 2 ships left, and the knowledge that with 1 more day, you could have made the difference. It's fun for how it really pushes you to make the most of what you're given, however. Drake is up next. Hawk has his navy trapped in a tough spot, and great losses are certain. The question is just how to minimize those losses as much as possible, since there's no hope of fighting back. That is, until Drake receives help from a certain special ally. No, not that samurai. It's our boy Convey, back for blood and redemption after his failure in the Yellow Comet factory mission. On this map, Hawk commands a massive land force, his army seemingly endless, and Convey's hope of a forward advance awful. In this challenge, those odds drop from awful to impossible, and Convey's presence here is merely to delay the end and draw fire while Drake moves his battleships down the coast until they are in range of the 2 black cannons pinning down his navy. Destroying these will win the run. While we're here, this is a good time to mention that Hawk has boosted stats, and his CO powers both function by stealing HP from my units to heal his own. In normal play, this power is annoying. In this run, it's brutal, since any repair I make likely means 1 less unit to build. He's going to be difficult in every encounter, and this mission will start a trend of me closely watching power meters before I risk buying an expensive unit. In the case of this mission though, despite Convey getting absolutely hammered and facing certain doom, access to pre-deployed battleships grants me a relatively easy victory. I jump from safe hidden tile to tile, and even get lucky while moving them that instead of getting damaged by a forest rockets in the one place I was exposed, I managed to park right next to it, and thus am safe from its attack. Both cannons fall in quick succession of each other, and the campaign to retake Green Earth continues. Oh, and did I mention how I once again left a structure on only 1 HP? Yeah, that happened again. Honest, I don't know what's with me in 1 HP. I don't plan this, but it always happens. I feel like the universe is trying to tell me something here. Should I put something 1 HP themed in my channel bio? My icon? Am I on 1 HP right now? Identity crisis aside, I have more footage for you, but I think it's about time we wrap up this chapter to keep this video from getting too long. When we return next, it will be the moment of truth, the grand finale of this challenge run. Will I be able to conquer Black Hole? Can I even liberate Green Earth? Or will Hawk's mighty defense crush my smaller armies into the dust? Stay tuned. Lunar Knights, signing off.